Welcome to the American Classroom Podcast. I'm Jared Taylor, the host, and here with my co-host Lindsay Croslin. And we are here to talk about the role of K-12 education in building a civil society. We have a special guest here with us, Jenny Clark, a great school choice advocate that we're excited to talk about and looking forward to it. So welcome, Lindsay, and welcome, Jenny. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Jenny, let's just start. Maybe share with our listeners a little bit about your background and how did you get into this wacky world of school choice?
Oh my goodness. Well, I am an Arizona native. I went to public schools in Arizona, kindergarten through 12th grade, and then on to the University of Arizona. And I have 5 children, ages 7 to 16, 3 boys and 2 girls. And I got into this whole crazy world of school choice because of my kids. So I was a homeschooling parent. I had, at that time, 4 very small kids at home, and my oldest son was struggling to learn to read. So, just imagine you're a homeschool mom. You're like, I can do this. This is the very, early stuff. Why is my son struggling to learn to read so much? And so we learned more about our rights. We did some research. We got some evaluations done at our local public school. And through that process, they said, oh, no, there's nothing wrong here. It's just lack of a proper education, because you're homeschooling. And I'm like, oh, this is my first, exposure to this kind of being challenged for being a homeschooler. Okay. So we ended up requesting some independent educational evaluations. Turns out our 2 oldest boys had significant dyslexia. And through kind of a long journey over the next year, we ended up on Arizona's Empowerment Scholarship Account Program, or the ESA program. Great. Amazing scholarship. And that was way back in 2017, 2018. And I kind of got thrust into the school choice environment because once we first got on ESA, it was under attack. And so I became this new mom on an ESA that really wanted to fight to make sure that parents knew how amazing the program was.
Because it significantly helped you and your boys.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the time, I was a stay-at-home mom. My husband was in law school and just was starting to graduate. And I started looking at all the dyslexia therapy options because the public school had said they didn't have any specific programs to support my students, because I probably would have enrolled them if they had. And the empowerment scholarship ended up being how we were able to afford all of the tutors, all of the therapists, the curriculum that we did at home that basically helped our kids learn how to read. And so became an advocate kind of for dyslexia and then for school choice as a result of that process. So
that's interesting. Well, you say dyslexia. It reminded when I was on the state board. I know you're an alumni of the Arizona State Board. Jill Norgard from the state legislature brought that to our attention, saying, hey, we're very much behind other states in terms of dyslexia support. And she just had a great program that we all supported. There was no opposition to it at all. We had a couple of little tweaks. And so I think hopefully Arizona will catch up in the space of dyslexia now that there's some support and some formalities there that can guide at least the public school space to better support children there. Well, Jenny, you've had a trip to the White House. Lindsay and I are just interested in a little bit about that and a couple of other questions about school choice if we can go there. But how was your visit to the White House?
Oh, it was incredible. You always think that you'll have maybe some sort of neat opportunity like that to go somewhere behind the scenes. At least if you're in my world, you do. I just love America so much and love any opportunity to be in Washington, D.C. And I got a phone call on a Monday. And it was, hey, it's National School Choice Week. We are doing this lunch at the White House with the president and a few different other folks and senators, and we'd love for you to participate. We're not sure your background check is actually going to be complete before you get on the plane. So we're going to answer a bunch of questions. I had kind of questions then, and then the next day, a little bit more vetting. And we just need you to book the ticket and get on the flight, and let's hope for the best. So I was actually at the airport getting ready to board my plane when I got the final phone call, which was, the day before, that everything had cleared. I was clear, clearances were good, and they hoped I was already getting on a plane. I said, I'm actually, 10 steps away from walking onto the plane. So it was really exciting. Of course, lots of security, no cell phones, all those different types of things. But one of the neatest things about being at the White House was the amount of time and energy and just engagement that President Trump gave all of us. I was absolutely blown away. Of course, there were folks in the room that were governors and senators, very important people, but there was a few of us who were just advocates, people working on the ground, and he gave us all equal attention and asked us various questions, and we had a very lengthy lunch. I remember at one time they came to pull the president out for some other meetings and kind of wrap the whole thing, and someone in around the table actually reminded him, hey, that phone call is important with that national leader, but the people in this room are more important. And he said, you know what? You're right. Let's finish our lunch. And when was the last time you guys all went to the Oval? And then he spent another 45 minutes with us in the Oval.
Wow.
So just really, really amazing
How fun.
experience. Yeah.
What was your sense in terms of not just President Trump, but Secretary of Education and the national landscape? Maybe share some observations.
One of the things that President Trump was really interested in is school choice. At that time, the Education Choice for Children Act, the federal tax credit, was still kind of in process as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill. And then there was a lot of conversations about different states that were attempting to get education savings accounts or ESA programs, namely Texas at the time was in process. So a lot of conversation around that. And the president really invited everyone in the room to share their feedback about why they disagreed with him, with what he was thinking on.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was really neat with various pieces of some of the legislation. He received that feedback really well. And essentially, a lot of us were sharing that me particularly, that Arizona's Empowerment Scholarship Account program was actually the best. And it's the gold standard because in our program, of course, you can start a private school right away. You don't have to have some sort of third-party accreditation. Other states, Texas, for example, you can't access their ESA program if you're a private school until your private school has been operational for 2 years. So that's a huge market barrier to anyone wanting to start a private school because the families there cannot be on the scholarship until after you've been operating for 2 years. State testing. Texas and other states require state testing. Arizona's ESA program has never required state testing. And of course, we're 15 years into our state's ESA, but almost 4 years into having a universal ESA where every student qualifies. So we talked a lot about those logistics and how those types of things matter. If we're actually wanting to transform a school choice landscape in our state, we have to remove the barriers and we have to make it as easy as possible for parents to get on an ESA, but then also for companies and schools and different education options to be able to just launch and serve those students. So that's a lot of what we talked about is what states are the model for ESA programs.
Hey, and it's great that Arizona is one of the icons of the movement right now.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Arizona absolutely is. Something I know we're going to talk about is just how important it is to continue to fight for all of our school choice options, whether it's open enrollment, charters, or ESAs.
I should probably know that, but the federal Big Beautiful Bill passed with the tax credits. When did those go in effect?
So very interesting the way that it's kind of been done. And there's still some rulemaking that's happening, which is a little complicated. But essentially, states have to opt in. I think now we're at 32 states that have opted in. The governor has to opt into the program. Arizona, as of today, has not opted into the program. And what that does is says our state is going to allow SGOs, which are a third-party vendor, to receive contributions for a tax credit, $1,700. And then those SGOs will distribute scholarships to private schools that they approve. There's also some eligibility for homeschoolers. So the state actually has to opt in. And then if they opt in, everything can start going into effect in 2026 into 2027. So, we're hopeful that Arizona might be able to opt in, but with the current landscape, that might not happen. There might need to be some political changes.
What is that process?
It's literally the governor officially declaring that they're opting in. It's a very simple process. Yeah.
The legislature can't override that?
No,
if they're at odds?
unfortunately not. And so there's a lot of, various efforts to say, hey, this is a nonpartisan issue. We should allow states and families to, contribute to an SGO and receive a tax credit. And that money can be given to a child to go to a better school.
Wow.
So we'll see what happens.
It's unbelievable how many barriers there are for parents to make the right choice for their children.
Yeah. The barriers are constantly there. And you have to constantly press in on the lawmaker side because everything gets so muddied. And then you have people that have worked so hard to get these bills passed and they're like, well, we just got to get it across the finish line. It's okay if these few things get added. But no, it's not. It's like we still have to keep fighting. I remember in 2022 when we were trying to get universal ESA here in Arizona, we were trying to get that, passed and signed by then Governor Ducey. There was a testing provision in there. And thankfully, we had enough very wise legislators who said, it is not worth requiring every private school to have testing to get this bill passed. And we should fight to get that removed. And they did fight to get it removed, and they were successful. So you want these programs to have as few barriers as possible, even from the side of the third-party administrator that's going to operate the whole SGO program. It's complicated. You're talking about people's taxes or making contributions. You got to make it as easy as possible for them to give the dollars so that they can then be scholarship to a student.
And the SGOs, are those different than the STOs, the
Good
Scholarship
question.
Tuition Organization?
They're similar, but they are different. They are
Okay.
different. And it's very interesting because in Arizona, some of your listeners might be familiar that we have had tuition tax credit scholarships for decades now, where in Arizona, families can give up to a certain amount per individual or married couple for local state tax credit scholarships. This is a completely different, almost third pot, different tax credit scholarship. Nationally, they've decided to call them SGOs. And so current Arizona STOs, those third-party administrators, they can participate. They just have to have completely separate books, separate guidelines, separate regulations. But Arizona is very well prepared to implement this federal tax credit, which I think is very exciting because we do have so many incredible nonprofits that have already been doing this in our state.
So what you touched on a little bit of controversy with any federal money for that matter, but certainly private school parents. There's a debate within the private school parents of like, do we take federal money or do we not? Because there may be, with shackles come shackles.
With government, with government shekels come shackles.
That's
yes.
how it says. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, how do you resolve that with people like the Mommy Lobby? You probably know Olga. Hello, Olga, if you're watching this.
Olga.
Olga's great, but that's a legitimate concern that she and other people in the private school space, do we take it or not? Because if we take it, then what are the strings attached, whether it's testing or standards or whatever it is?
Yeah.
What do you say
Well,
to that?
I think those concerns are so valid and so legitimate, and we have to continue to fight for very few or no regulations on some of these programs. I get critiqued, when I say that, but let me explain, why. And we need to make sure that if we actually have these programs, that they're actually benefiting families. Because once you start to add regulations, it becomes very cumbersome, very difficult for people to actually utilize the dollars. And private schools, and I agree with this, as we're kind of launching our own private option, you start to go, it is not worth it for us to go down this path because at some point in the future, they may require something that we don't agree with. And so I think it's a very valid concern. It's something worth fighting for to keep the regulations out of some of these programs. Now, my argument has been, let's say with ESA programs, because there's a large faction of the homeschool community and particularly the Christian homeschool community across the country, to say no to education savings account programs. And so my response has always been, well, let's look at Arizona. In Arizona, there have been no new regulations on homeschoolers in our state in the 15 years that we have had education savings accounts. So I will fight vigorously, for homeschoolers to never be touched, for them to be protected, who are not taking these programs. But if there are families out there who say, you know what, in some states they do require testing, and they say, I'm okay with that. If there's some private schools that say, we already do the state testing, we're okay with that, then they should have that option and that opportunity. But thankfully in Arizona, we haven't had any new regulations on private schools. Now we have to fight. We have to be vigilant because, opposition groups who want to control every little aspect of these education savings accounts, of homeschoolers, of charter schools, of private schools, they are always there at the door, looking to try to dismantle these opportunities. So we do have to be vigilant.
Yeah, and they're screaming accountability. And of course, they'll never hold themselves accountable to the failed regulations
That's right.
that they've put on or the failed education models that they are trying to defend, as arcane as they are. But, oh no, we have to hold all these new options of school choice accountable,
Yep.
but they're never held accountable. I mean, how many
Absolutely.
times did you put a school district in receivership on the
Oh,
state board?
multiple times we put
versus-
school districts in receivership
Yeah.
for
You were
misspending,
on
for
the board for
improper
the
spending.
Isaac School District
Yes,
when
I
that went
was.
down.
Yes, for Isaac.
But
and
it's about saving them, not let them go out like the other school choices. So they can't have it both ways,
Well,
but they do.
And on the individual level with parents, that's a lot of what I deal with. They'll say, well, maybe I'm concerned or I don't like the Empowerment Scholarship Account program because there's no accountability. And I say, well, let's stop for a second. Right now we're seeing 30% or less of students that are reading proficiently at grade level in Arizona public schools based on the last NAEP scores or the nation's report card. And so what accountability do all those parents have? Are they getting their money back? Do they get extra special funding and tutoring for their kids to get caught up because they're not reading proficiently and never have? Let's say some of those kids have never read proficiently. What do you mean by accountability? Because those parents are not able to hold the public school accountable if their child's not getting an education. Contrast that with something like an ESA, or when a parent chooses a charter school or a parent chooses a private school, you have a lot of accountability because you can remove your child, you can go somewhere else. And with an ESA, you get to actually choose who's educating your child. So that's true
Huge.
accountability.
It's huge. Well, the only other thing I would add to parents that have legitimate concerns about federal, money coming into a private operation or a home operation, a homeschool, is usually any strings attached are really for that year, that school year, right? They can't legally enforce it. Meaning
Good
if you
point.
don't like it, you can just don't take it the next year.
Yes.
And all those
Yeah,
regulations.
if they start to
go
add the
away.
regulations,
Yeah, if
absolutely.
they start to add it, but while there's less regulations or the regulations that you don't find palatable,
Yeah.
or okay, it's like, okay, we'll take the state
That's
test.
a reasonable approach.
Then
Yes.
we're okay with it. But until then,
And that's what we tell parents and schools related to the ESA program. We're like, listen, if something changes and they do add regulations onto the ESA program, then you can opt out. Of course, a lot of their concern is, well, then we built our whole financial model on something like this. I'm like, guys, we don't have a crystal ball.
yeah.
You do what you can. You accept the dollars if you feel comfortable with whatever the regulations are. Thankfully, we have very few right now. And then you deal with the decisions, what comes down the pipe. So,
Well, let's talk about the state.
yeah.
And what's going on in the state.
Yeah.
I know you're fighting for a couple things, but give us some of the good, the bad, the ugly here, at least in our little corner of the United States.
Yes, in Arizona. Well, there's a lot happening in Arizona, of course. There's continued plans to regulate Arizona's ESA program. There's some various, ballot initiatives that are happening that are, quite challenging that we're dealing with right now, just because we want to continue to maintain as much freedom as possible for parents and for private schools. I think there's a lot of opportunity to look at what is happening in the public school system related to their financial models, and then also how they release properties. We've seen school closures in Paradise Valley Unified, Scottsdale Unified. Even in the last 2 weeks, Scottsdale Unified has announced that they also have 2 more schools that they might close. And contrary to what people might think, which is that, this is a result of, private school choice, it's actually the opposite. A lot of these schools built out new locations and new properties when they did not have the student enrollment and birth rate projections to justify building those buildings. And so we're seeing those schools close because demographic shifts and changes. So that's something I always really like to point out. But I also think we need to look at ways to make it easier for the public schools to let go of those properties and either sell them to charter schools or sell them to private operators. Right now, it's very difficult. There's lots of board meetings. There's lots of rigmarole. There's votes that have to happen both at the citizen level. They can't just say, we're closing this private school. It's costing us $10 million a year and it's empty. We need to get it off of our books. In fact, right now, you're actually not incentivized to let go of an empty private school. There's a beautiful private school in the Paradise Valley Unified School District that we were interested in for our school. It's on Cholla.
Public school.
Yeah, public school, empty public school that's on Cholla and 36th Street. It's been empty for a year. They will not lease it. They have no incentive to lease it because they still get the dollars from the state to maintain that property, regardless if there's a student in there or not. Completely empty.
It's insane.
And the fields are going to, we don't have someone in there. You don't see the stuff. The fields are kind of going, different things I'm sure are happening inside the building that we don't even know about. And so we've got opportunity to tackle that kind of thing too, because we have other private schools and charter schools that are full. Yeah. We should be quickly selling those types of properties and giving other school operators that are in demand the opportunity to purchase them.
The taxpayers are paying for these empty schools.
Yep.
And it's insane. They should. What I also find a little bit hypocritical is some of these districts are leasing to for-profit private schools.
Yes. I know all about that.
They want the money. But then on the other hand, then they're all about, for-profit schools are the devil.
Yep.
But here they go. They'll take the devil's money.
Yes, in this district and at this location, prior to it being empty for this year, there was a private school that will remain unnamed that accepts students with disabilities. And they do great work. But some of these private schools that are for-profit, they actually don't accept empowerment scholarship account students who have special needs and more significant needs. And so the question I had was, well, why?
Why? Yeah.
Well, because they're getting double the per student amount from like an ESA. Let's say the ESA for a student with significant disabilities, maybe non-speaking or needs a full-time aide, it's around $30,000 to $34,000 a year. But the district private pay, if that student is privately placed by the district in that private school, it's around $60,000 per student that they're getting in tuition. So you're absolutely right. First of all, there are plenty of public schools. Every single district that I know of, because I pulled the data once, is privately placing students in private schools. And then those schools don't have an incentive to have market competition on their tuition because the public school is going to pay them regardless. Wow. So that's the other reason why I love ESA, is because there are amazing private schools that have started that serve students with disabilities, and they're doing it for half the cost.
So you're saying the taxpayer is paying double so that the districts can harvest most of that, where the taxpayers could probably be paying an appropriate amount, even though that's higher for those with disabilities.
Exactly right.
Interesting.
That's exactly right.
Interesting.
For audience, or for listeners who don't know what an empowerment scholarship is, whether they're in Arizona or they're outside of Arizona, will you just briefly explain what it is and how it's, the redirecting of the taxpayer money?
Absolutely.
Doubling up on it.
Yeah. So Arizona's Empowerment Scholarship Account Program, which we call an ESA, little confusing because nationally they're also called ESAs, but it stands for an Education Savings Account nationally. But Arizona's ESA program has been around since 2011, and it originally started with a few small qualifying categories of students: military families and special needs families. Each year, they added a few more categories like siblings, if you were in a D or F rated school district. And then it went universal, meaning all students in Arizona, regardless of the family's income or zip code, qualified for an ESA in 2022. What an ESA is 90% of the state's portion of the per student funding. So on average, it's around $7,500 per year per student for a neurotypical student. It does have a weight attached to it that's similar to the state funding, where if a student has a disability, that amount can go up. The amount doesn't go up that much for, let's say, ADHD, dyslexia, or other learning disabilities. You start to see it go up a lot when it's a more significant disability, like an autism or multiple disability, severe sensory impairment. So Arizona total, all included, so local dollars, federal dollars, and state dollars, when a student is going to a public district school, is around $15,300. And so you can see that, especially since we've had the program universal for the last 3 to 4 years, every time a family opts into an ESA now versus a public school, taxpayers are actually saving money because it's $7,500 compared to $15,300 all included. So over time, I do think that we'll start to see significant savings as more families choose an ESA over a public district school.
That's huge.
So the families can take the money that's allocated to
Yes,
them
thank
and
you.
use it at any school that they want to.
Yes, so families can take that scholarship. The money also rolls over each year if they don't use it, and they can use it to home educate with curriculum, tutors, therapists. They can go to a micro school, or they can use it to pay private school tuition. There's very specific expenses that are outlined in the law, contrary to what the news and people might say. Very specific things that you can purchase. And then there is significant tracking inside of your portal for each student of what you can spend those dollars on. You have to have a receipt for every single transaction. You have to have curriculum uploaded. And then if you have a tutor or a therapist, you have to have their degree or license.
What are the numbers? So how many families are participating in the ESA program right
just
now?
over 102,000 students are on Arizona's ESA program as of last week. So that's about 10% of Arizona's school age population.
Okay, that's great participation.
It is.
And school choice really does bless every family. So, I know that Heritage Academy has gone into communities where there was failing schools, and then just by creating some competition, saying, this particular model is an A-rated school, well, the local schools really have to step it up to compete, to hold.
Step it up or close, which is
Yeah,
exactly what
if
we
they
want.
their enrollment to stay up, then they have to compete. And so they've all stepped it up. And I feel like the whole community's really benefited from having more choice. And so I feel like that's true for an entire state, not just for a specific community.
I think so too. And these changes, when you're talking about so many students and so many schools, it takes time, right? So I think sometimes early on people were fearful, all these families are going to switch to an empowerment scholarship, and then all these schools are going to close. I'm like, guys, that's just not going to happen. It takes a lot of time to get the dollars, the infrastructure, the teachers to set up a school. It will happen slowly and over time, but ultimately, don't we want parents to have those choices? Like my kids, at times, all 5 of them have been in different school options. There was a time my kids did an online charter program because that is what we needed. And that's what I love about those of us in the school choice world and environment. We get to have those choices for our own kids, because sometimes homeschooling might be right for a family. Other times, a hybrid option 2-day a week might be great. Other times, a family needs a 5-day a week choice. So we all just really have to work together because we do genuinely need all of these schools to succeed. And I would argue district schools too. A high-performing, amazing district school, I want them to succeed as well. I want that to be a choice for families.
Yeah.
Well, one size fits one.
Yes.
Right?
Not all.
One size fits one, but
yeah, I was just going to say, if the students are learning, right, if they're getting a proper education, if they're being nurtured, if they're being, challenged, they're learning how to think, like all these things that are so important. Like you said, that environment can be
absolutely
completely different. And like you've experienced with your own kids, different kids need different.
How have you guided parents through this? It's a little foggy when people step into the Arizona school choice. There's so many. You just don't go to the local neighborhood school and they tell you to shut up and color, right? That's kind of how we were raised.
Yes.
This is where you go.
Yes.
And you're going to like it. Rah, 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 school choice, right? Now you have all these choices. And how do you consult? I know you get a lot of questions.
Yeah, this is your specialty.
Yes,
you started Love Your School.
So at Love Your School, we have we have education navigators, our parent support specialists, and that's exactly what they do. So we start with usually an email or a phone call where a parent finds us either from another parent or being referred by somebody else, and then we have a large Facebook group of about 13,000 families. At some point, we need to do something other than Facebook because groups can get shut down. Facebook can do whatever it wants. But you just see all the families in there, and then the families that reach out to us that are like, I just moved here, or I finally have a kindergarten age kiddo. What do I do? And so we go through kind of a process with them. If there's someone that comes directly to Love Your School that says, well, where do you live? How far are you willing to drive? What's your ideal education environment? Is it faith-based or secular? Is it hybrid or full day? Are you at all interested in homeschooling? And then we try to guide them to the resources that we know about and other parents that are in our groups that can help them say, this is what you should do. This is where you should start. There's a few situations sometimes where a parent will say, they just want something that's like a unicorn that doesn't exist yet. And we're like, gosh, we don't know anything that exists with what you're talking about. Do you want to start it? Or we say, this is like the next best option. I would say the option that I would like to see more of is more specialty schools that are faith-based for students with disabilities. I think there's just a lot of parents who are like, I want my child to have a faith foundation, but they may have significant needs or behavioral challenges. And it's very difficult to find schools that meet all of those types of needs. There's some, and they're growing. There's Polaris Academy, which is out here in Mesa. They're not faith-based, but they're doing an incredible job. There's Indie Learning, which is a little bit more of a program where parents can choose a couple days a week. So I want to continue to see more options for students with disabilities because it's a huge challenge. It's a huge need.
Yeah. I usually ask the parents, like, what tell us about your child.
Yes.
What are the interests? What are their strengths? What are your fears? And how can we match their strengths with the school? Because it kind of narrows it down once they understand really how their child responds to education. Some thrive in district schools.
It's true.
And I know you and I are school choice advocates, but we both sat on the state board.
Yep.
And we know that there's great
There are.
district
I would
school,
tour
public
them and I'm like,
school
this is a
options.
beautiful public
And
district
they're
school.
doing great things. And I refer to people, refer
Same.
families to them. Sometimes that's the best choice. Other times it's not. And they need boutique, different choices for their family. But if they don't know what their child really needs and how he or she will thrive, in this or that environment, the choices
And
are
sometimes they have to try
dizzying.
it. Yeah, sometimes they have to actually try that environment. And so that's new, right? Like in my environment, there was never, growing up, you would never switch. Like I went to one school, kindergarten through 6th grade, then a middle school, then a high school. There was no switching. And so that's a lot of what we coach parents through also is maybe they have tried something and it didn't work. And they're like nervous about disrupting their child. I'm like, well, if it's not working, let's go ahead and try something else because you can try something else and it's okay to switch. It's better to do that now than later.
It is. Yeah. I mean, you only got one shot for your children.
That's right.
You got to make it work. And the good thing about like Oliver School and others, there's so many good resources. And now with the Empowerment Scholarship Act, now you have some monetary resources as well as the, consulting and talking to good people. And it's almost like the golden age of school choice in some ways, notwithstanding all the headwind that is coming at the school choice movement. And it's the same old game, regulated to death.
Yes. Death by 1,000 cuts.
Death by 1,000
each year.
Yeah. So people listening to this that love school choice, you got to plug into your local politics because, all politics is local.
That's exactly right.
And if you don't, and we're not saying you need to be crazy over the top, but you do need to be plugged in. And maybe we'll put in the show notes some links or some helpful ways for people to at least stay educated on things because ballots come up very, very frequently. And a lot of these anti-school choice things are snuck in.
That's exactly right.
And sometimes if they don't want to put it on the ballot, they want to just send it through an exexecutive order or an administrative
or
rule.
do something at a school district level or state board level.
State board level.
Engage.
Well, and we're both alumni there, right? Yeah. And one thing I like to tell people as well is get a job in the Department of Education or get a job in an administrative office if you have that skill set and desire, because a lot of people that are in these agencies, they do not like you. They do not like your values.
That's right.
They do not like choice.
And they've been there through multiple elected officials, the staff and the folks that are there. So that's a great piece of advice.
Yeah, my daughter's just finishing her graduate degree in history at ASU.
Oh my.
And most of the people in her program are there to go get a government job to shut down school choice.
Yes.
Or to advance a political agenda.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
on the taxpayer's dime.
On the taxpayer's dime.
And people have no clue they're working against
the very thing that they are supposed to be promoting and defending your right for school choice. Mm-hmm. And that's just the sad reality of it. We could live with rose-colored glasses, but so listeners should be educated and informed and get involved in certain ways. Mm-hmm. But well, hey, so you are pushing out the bravery to start a new school.
Yes. Oh my.
And we want to hear about it.
Thank you so much. So myself and my husband and then 3 other couples, we are launching Redeemer Classical Christian Schools. It is a network. We hope it will be a network of classical Christian hybrid schools. So right now it's 2 days a week for TK through 4th grade and 2 days a week, 5th grade and above. We have just come under the conviction of the classical model and we love it and we're really excited about it. And we've done so many different things for our kids as well. And we also really think there is an opportunity to provide high quality classical education 2 days a week. And then the parents are implementing the other 2 days a week at home.
Interesting.
I've seen some really neat models, both in Tucson. There's one that's been there for many, many years, called Veritas Tucson. And then there's several across the country in Texas and other places that we're modeling after. So we're trying to find the best of both worlds, right? For a lot of those really engaged homeschooling families. But then I found myself in this situation. You start to get to certain areas of academia or, upper level math and things where some parents love that and are qualified for that. Other parents are like, you know what? I've homeschooled for 10 years and I'm actually really excited for my kids to be taught by somebody else. And so that is what we're doing with Redeemer Classical. Our website's redeemerclassical.com. We've opened applications a month ago, have had really encouraging interest, incredible interest. And our location is on Camelback and 32nd Street, our first location. We're looking to create small school options in probably to start multiple churches. These churches are empty, 5 days a week.
Yep.
And sometimes they have 15 to 18 classrooms that are just beautiful and lovely. And meanwhile, we have a lot of incredible private schools that are full. I was talking to a friend. She's like, oh, you don't even want to know how hard it is to get into kinder at such and such private school. It's like a bloodbath. And I'm like, well, we're here for you if you don't get in,
Yeah.
We just had a family recently who didn't get into a TK program and was like, are you still accepting applications? We're like, absolutely. So we're really excited about it. We think it's a good on-ramp for families, and we'll just see what God does.
Good for you.
Thank
Well,
you.
we're going to be cheering you on.
Thank
and
you.
We're going to put information.
It's
in
nerve-wracking,
the
as
show
you know.
notes. It is.
Going from being just a school choice advocate, all these policies, to actually like the nitty-gritty of creating a seat for a student.
Yeah.
It's exciting and terrifying.
It is. We're launching 2 new schools
Oh my gosh.
this week. One is another Heritage Academy Elementary. So
Amazing.
it's a little easier once you're replicating something.
Fair.
But a second one is more athletic oriented, but it's ground up, just like what you're doing. And it's a lift.
Yep.
It's
it
a
is.
lift. It's a lift, but that's good. But education is a team sport.
It is. Yep.
And you've got a good team, and
We do.
any of our listeners that want class, I'm glad you're embracing classical education.
Yes.
If our listeners don't know that, we should probably have an episode on what that really means.
Oh, that would be amazing.
'cause
Because
it's
classical education
drifted.
will save the country. I mean, that is the truth.
Yeah.
And when I'm super interested and involved in a lot of different, tech companies, defense companies. I follow all of those guys on social media, whether they're, building nuclear reactors or they're doing software or hard tech. And contrary to what people think, they are very interested in students that have been classically trained. They're like, listen, we can teach you how to operate this robot. We can teach you how to build this drone. We can't give you a moral foundation. And we can't help you understand the beauty of our country and how to protect it. And classically trained students can do that. So those companies, these amazing companies, are recruiting from classic schools.
Yeah.
Crazy. It's exciting.
Oh yeah, yeah. I had lunch the other day with a CEO of an online scrapbook company, and I said, "How did you get to Goldman Sachs with a philosophy degree?"
That's a good
Because
question.
he spent 4 or 5 years in Wall Street and Goldman Sachs, and his undergrad was in philosophy. Anyways, it was a really interesting explanation. He's like, they don't want the same old finance major from Wharton.
That's right.
They want someone who thinks broadly and understands the world
right.
and the constructs of civilization and humanity. And they'll teach you all the trading stuff.
That's exactly
and
right.
They'll teach you the
Yeah. People are like, we need to prepare kids for the AI tech workforce. And I get asked about that all the time. And, people tend to critique my answer. I'm like, oh, if you want to prepare a student for the AI workforce, they should go to a classical school.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you go to industry, and I came out of industry, they're always complaining about the soft skills.
Yes.
Because
It matters.
it matters.
Yeah.
And that's what the humanities do. Not just the ability to communicate, but the inside person.
Yeah.
Do you have good moral fabric in your employees?
Yes.
They're going to stay around. They're going to be honest, right?
right.
You're not going to, anyways, they're going to show up and get things done.
That's
But
right.
good
Yeah.
for you.
There's going to be a lot of ethical decisions that need to be made with AI.
That's
So
exactly right.
Exactly.
Yes, and that's exactly the conversation in some of these briefings that I've been in with some of these national institutes. They're like, we have to win the AI race against, let's say China. And so we need to keep regulations low. But we also need to know who is the person making the decision. Is it, OpenAI and ChatGPT and Sam Altman,
Yeah.
who probably don't care what your children see online or what they're exposed to on ChatGPT? Or is it someone else over here who's gone to, let's say St. John's,
Yeah.
who is saying, you know what, we want to build an amazing product, but we also know the limitations. And we want to put limitations in.
Yeah. I was in business school when Enron and WorldCom blew up.
Ah, yes.
And then all of a sudden we all took ethics courses, the next year. Oh, we're just introducing
Making
ethics.
sure.
And like, that's the problem. I mean, AI is like an Enron nuclear bomb
Well
about
said.
ready to go off
That's
unless we have a good moral fabric
That's right.
in those employees that understands the constraints of human nature and the limits and the controls, and protections that are required for civilization to move forward. Anyways, that's
Absolutely.
a podcast for another day.
I
And
know.
maybe we'll have you
It's a big
back, and
one.
we'd love to hear how your school goes, and
Thank
good
you.
luck, and let us know how we can help on
Thank you so
your new
much.
venture. Thank you.
If you had to think, 5 years, 10 years down the road for the best landscape for school choice, what does that look like to you?
So I think somewhere down the road, we are going to have to get to a point where we're doing significantly large refundable tax credits directly to parents instead of scholarships that are managed through the state. One of the reasons why I think that's eventually the future is because government can grow when you have programs where every transaction has to be, vetted at a state agency, where you start from, 2 employees to now you have 57 government employees managing some of these programs. I just think the best solution is to give money directly back to parents so that they can take it wherever they want. And ultimately, if it's a scholarship, there shouldn't be all of this regulation on the back end about what can be done with it and how it can be spent. So I'd love to see that somewhere down the road, because there's a lot of burdens in operating these programs, both for the schools and for the parents, and then also government. Every time you have a government program, the government piece of it tends to grow and grow and grow. If we can't get that, I would just love to see more private industry being involved in that process instead of the government agencies. There's no reason for a state to have 50 or 100 employees managing these ESA programs. That's just crazy. I mean, we've seen with the Department of Education how quickly things can balloon completely out of control on the administrative and staffing side. So whenever we can start to use private industry to jump in and say, well, private industry can check transactions better. Private industry can streamline this process of applications and take it down to 2 minutes instead of 30 days with the state agency. I'd like to see some of that too. There are regulations on like the charter school side, even on the district school side, that I would love to see removed to really free up schools to operate better and make decisions faster. So we got to keep fighting for those things.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I love that. And with the rapid growth in technology, to check those transactions is like...
I know. There's opportunity to do it better.
Yeah. One irony in Arizona about the growth of red tape and regulation is it's largely been done under Republicans.
It's very
Who
true.
run as small government, low regulation people, but when they get in office, it's completely the opposite.
Yep. They're hiring. They're hesitant to,
Like, come on.
do RFPs and find companies that can come in and do it better. And I don't know why that is. I mean, when you look at some of the companies that we have out there, I'm a huge fan of Palantir software company, and they're just transforming different government agencies and defense tech. I'm like, why don't we have Palantir in here running the Arizona ESA program? Like, it would probably be nothing for them to do something
because
like that.
as you know, government is a jobs program.
It is.
And they will never bring in the tech to get rid of their jobs, right? What didn't Ronald Reagan say? The closest thing to eternal life is a government program.
There you go. It is the truth. It is the truth. And they're always hiring.
Exactly.
They're always hiring.
Always
You're like, how is
hiring.
this happening? How are you always hiring?
Yeah, and the game is when there's a scandal, the solution is we need more budget and we need more headcount.
More people to be able to track this.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's
And
what's happening with the ESA program.
It
They're
just
like,
doesn't work.
if we had more employees, we'd be able to stop these things. I'm like, no, if you had better technology,
Exactly.
you could have stopped it years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And freedom does work, right? Because if you look at the waste in the ESA program, and there's a little compared to the waste in the other distributions.
Oh, yes. There's no comparison.
There is no comparison.
Yeah, it's astronomically lower misspending or unallowed items in the
Right.
ESA program compared to the regular public school system.
Right.
And it's found faster. That's the other thing that people don't realize is that sometimes it's not even found in public district systems because the system is so large. And you don't, in some cases, even have line item transaction level data in these public school district systems, whereas in the ESA program, you actually do. And it takes years to uncover it. So,
Right. And by that time, you're never going to get it back.
nope,
Yeah.
never.
So,
What are some criticisms about the ESA?
Sure.
I've heard things on the news saying that there's misspending by parents and homeschool groups. I'm part of a Facebook group that I see a lot of parents talking about ESA
Yeah.
expenditures, but they'll be like, do you guys think that this microscope is okay to buy for my child's science program because I'm worried it's going to get criticized or like not
Yes.
approved? And so parents really do want to spend things on the items or the curriculum that are going to benefit their children and their educational program. But I feel like there are a few people here and there that do buy crazy
Yes,
things that
you
do things, but I
always
feel like
have,
that's
yeah.
minimal, but the news blows it up. So can you talk about the
absolutely.
percentage of those expenditures?
Yeah,
that actually-
absolutely. So it's no surprise to anybody, listening or watching that the mainstream media is always looking to critique and kind of destroy these types of school choice options. We kind of chuckle because we're like, we can point you over here where there's far greater misspending or even potential fraud in other programs. And they're not interested. They're interested in the things that really are unlocking freedom for families, whether it's charter schools, homeschooling, or the ESA program. So we've had continued criticism that's actually been completely debunked. And we're actually pushing for a retraction from one of our local news stations that I grew up watching, where they said, here is a list of expenses, and the ESA program has 20% of fraud in the program, which would be horrible if that was actually true. But in reality, the Arizona Department of Education just 2 weeks ago did a full randomized sample, evaluated every single transaction in a statistically significant sample of transactions. It was about 3,000 transactions, and said, let's look at the total number of spending and then the total amount of unallowed items that were spent. And then they did a third category, what they would call like egregious items, right? Like items that would never be allowed in the program. Because sometimes an unallowed item is unallowed because it's like a backpack, which isn't allowed with ESA. I saw the list, lunch boxes, not allowed. Or sometimes it's a parent didn't upload the proper documentation. And so the actual amount of what they would call unallowed egregious spending was 0.3%.
wow.
So then, of course, all of us who are advocates, we really went back to 12 News and some of these other stations and said, guys, if you have journalistic integrity, you got to pull your stories, because this number is completely inaccurate. It was calculated improperly. It was actually calculated from a sample that had already been pulled for risk-based auditing. So it wasn't a total sample. It was just a risk-based audit sample that they got their 20%. And now it's misleading the public. It's misleading not only the Arizona public, but people nationally about the ESA program. So we're just keeping the pressure on. We think it's worth it to keep the pressure on. We think that Arizona families deserve to have the knowledge and the truth about the program and how accountable it is. When you compare the amount of what's called improper payments in Arizona's Access program or our SNAP benefits program, you're talking 7 to 9% misspending in those programs. And our argument has basically been, especially with this latest data and press release from the department, we actually have the lowest improper unallowed spending rate in the ESA program compared to any other government program in the state.
Wow.
So it's pretty remarkable. And that's kind of been my point in perspective. We should be doing that kind of data sample every quarter. Why not? We have nothing to hide. The government should be held accountable. And in fact, the more you do those types of things, the faster you identify bad actors or people looking to abuse the program. But I think you're right. I think the amount of unallowed items and misspending is so low because it's personal dollars that you're using for your kid. So there's a much higher incentive to spend the dollars properly.
Yeah, I think the good book calls that straining at a gnat and swallowing a camel.
Yes.
That is.
Yes, exactly.
That's what's going on here. But Jenny, thank you. This is a great discussion. Anything you'd like to leave with our listeners here on school choice or anything else you're
Well, it's kind
working
of
on,
related
or-
to something that you said. Just a
Yeah.
final thought is, you may be at home. You may have a lot of time on your hands. You may be working full time and have maybe 10 minutes a week. But think about what time that you can give each week to make sure that you're dialed in and involved about what's happening at the local level with your child's education, either at the school board level, at the PTO level, if it's an ESA, what's happening at the legislative level, because people would be surprised if they knew how a small group of committed parents can actually make significant changes when it comes to policies or procedures or just what's happening in a school. I know at the state board, if we had just 5 parents come and speak on something that they were really passionate about and they gave really good information and talking points, we were like, if these 5 parents showed up, there's probably 5,000 parents behind them that don't have the time and energy to come down here. And we would take it very seriously. So don't be surprised how great of an impact that you can have, even with the small amount of time that you might have as a parent who's listening to this.
I love
I
it.
love that advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate you
you.
being on here, and we're going to have you back next year to hear about the new school and other
And
things that
hopefully
are
it's a
going
great
on.
success and I have a lot
It
to
will
share.
be.
That
It
would be
will be.
lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. If you like this episode, please like and share with someone who would find this interesting. We appreciate you listening to the American Classroom podcast today.
Thank you.
American Classroom is brought to you by Heritage Academy Mesa. Heritage Academy in Mesa, Arizona is a public charter school serving grades 7 through 12. Youth that come to Heritage are not just students, but scholars who are taught by the #1 rated faculty in Arizona. If you'd like to learn more about Heritage Academy Mesa, please visit heritageacademyaz.com and click Mesa.